Hello everybody, I am Beelzebub. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. I am continuing with Chapter 2, Dealing Psychic Damage to Myself, reading The Answers book by Ken Ham, Andrew Snelling, and Carl Weiland. Chapter 2, what about continental drifts? This is gonna hurt. Fortunately, it's only like 9 or 10 pages. It's not as long as Chapter 1 was. So let's answer their first question. Have the continents really moved apart? 30 years ago, most geologists were adamant that the information they had about the Earth could be explained only by the idea that the continents were stationary. Hang on, that doesn't. Hang on. Okay. This is the revised edition of this book. The first printing was in November of 91, and the second was in May of 92. So you want to tell me that in 1962, scientists didn't have an understanding of plate tectonics and continental drift? Did you do any research into this? I genuinely don't think you did. Now I don't have evidence that he's wrong. I don't know offhand when exactly geologists understood the idea of continental drift or plate tectonics, but something tells me we knew about plate tectonics and continental drift before 1962. Don't worry, it's just water, not alcohol. I'm doing enough damage to my brain just by reading this nonsense that I spilled a little water on. I mean, for crying out loud, we've known about earthquakes for how long? And okay. Only a handful of geologists promoted the notion that the continents had moved, continental drift. But those believers were accused by the majority of indulging in pseudoscience fantasy. Today, that opinion has reversed. Continental drift is now the ruling theory, taught as fact, because theories explain fact. I am getting brain damage from this. And those who dare question it are usually labeled as stubborn and ignorant. What brought about such a dramatic turnabout? Between 1962 and 1968, 4 main lines of independent experiments and measurements gave rise to the remarkable synthesis we call plate tectonics. 1. Mapping and topography of the sea floor using echo-depth sounders. There's a little map right there of the different plates. So, well, it's a simplified map. But as far as I can tell, with what I'm given to understand about plate tectonics, this is at least somewhat accurate. 2. Measuring the magnetic field above the seafloor using magnetometers. 3. Timing the north-south reversals of the Earth's magnetic field using magnetic memory of rocks from the continents and their radiometric ages. 4. Determining very accurately the location of earthquakes using the worldwide network of seismometers originally developed to detect nuclear blasts. Okay. I will, in my more or less ignorance of these 4 experiments? Sure. Plate tectonics. The general tenets of plate tectonics theory may be stated as follows. The Earth's surface crust consists of a mosaic of rigid plates, each moving relative to adjacent plates. Deformation occurs at the edges of the plates by 3 types of horizontal motion: extension or rifting, slipping, and compression. Seafloor spreading occurs where 2 plates are moving away from each other horizontally, for example, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and East Pacific Rise, with new molten material from the Earth's mantle being added between them to form a new oceanic crust, or form new oceanic crust. Transform faulting occurs where 1 plate is slipping horizontally past another. An example, the San Andreas Fault of California. Subduction occurs where 2 plates are colliding, with 1 plate being pushed under the other, producing compressional deformation. Example, the Peru-Chile Trench and associated Andes Mountains of South America and the Himalayan Mountains, where the Indian plate collided with the Asian plate. Okay. Not hearing anything wrong. I mean, yeah, it's literally how you define what these things are. So at least he's being honest about this. Let's. I'm not going to hold my breath. I don't think the honesty will hold up for very long. In keeping with their evolutionary uniformitarian assumptions, plate tectonics has nothing to do with evolution. What are you talking about? That declined so quickly. it's just geologists suppose that the plates move very slowly. They measure them. They measure the movement of the plates. They can accurately measure this. What are you? About 2 to 18 centimeters per year. You just gave the measurement. You proved my point in the next sentence. What? At this rate, it would take 100 million years to form an ocean basin or mountain range. Although most geologists today enthusiastically endorse this theory of drifting continents, there still remains a significant minority of very competent Earth scientists who do not. Oh, I'm calling bullshit here. I'm definitely calling bullshit on the competence. Their objections are quite numerous, so only a few main objections will be summarized here. Sorry, neighbor puppy. Fitting of continents. The idea that the continents can be fitted together like a jigsaw to form a single supercontinent is an old one, based on the interesting apparent fit of the eastern bulge of South America into the southwestern cavity of Africa. Okay, so hold on. You literally have a picture right here of how well they fit. You have a picture. Why? Why do you do this to me, Ken? Recent investigators have used computers to try to fit the continents, but even one of the best reconstructions of how Africa, South America, Europe, and North America once fitted together has areas of overlap between these continents, and Central America is omitted altogether. Okay, so this probably is not actually a real map because I did not notice. There is no Mexico. So this is probably something he made up himself. Okay. But if the theory is true, only one can be correct. Some reconstruct. Hold on. Okay. There are a number of ways to fit South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. But if the theory is true, only one can be correct. Some reconstructions have been shown to be geometrically feasible, but are impossible to explain by continental drift. For example, rotation of Eastern Australia to fit into Eastern North America. He has more pictures here, which I don't know where he's coming up with these. Seafloor spreading. Evidence suggests seafloor spreading is claimed by many geologists to be the most compelling argument for plate tectonics. In the ocean basins along mid-ocean ridges, plates are thought to be diverging slowly and continuously, with molten mantle-derived material being injected between the plates and cooling to form new oceanic crust. The youngest crust is claimed to be at the ridge crests, with the rocks becoming progressively older away from the crests. At the time of cooling, some of the rock's minerals acquire magnetism from the Earth's magnetic field. Since the Earth's magnetic field is supposed to have reversed numerous times in the past, during some epochs the cooling oceanic crust should have been reversely magnetized. I don't think that's how it works. I don't think that is. Now, I'm not a geologist. I know very little about rocks other than some are shinier than others and some are harder than others. So damn, I'm thirsty. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but take what Ken is saying with a brick of salt. So thus, if seafloor spreading is continuous, the ocean floor should possess a magnetic tape recording of reversals. It is claimed that a zebra stripe pattern of linear magnetic anomalies parallel to the mid-ocean ridge crest has been recorded in some areas, while potassium-argon dating has been alleged to show older rocks farther from the ridge crest. I am having so much trouble reading today. Lines along the sea floor do show the Earth's magnetic poles have reversed on a regular sea. Yes. Purple is, again, correct. Magnetic stripes. However, there are some very serious problems with this compelling evidence. Rezanov concluded that paleomagnetic data are so unreliable and contradictory that they cannot be used as evidence either for or against the hypothesis of the relative drift of continents or their parts. Purple's got a fun fact for us. Let's read this instead of giving ourselves brain damage. A hammerhead shark is built that way because they have magnetic sensor and use them to navigate by the magnetic patterns on the seafloor. Interesting. I did not know that. But now I do. Asymmetry of magnetic stripes, not symmetry, is the normal occurrence. Vine and Wilson, among the leading early investigators, admitted, as ever in the interpretation of magnetic anomalies, there is no unique solution, and the various parameters are so flexible that having assumed normal and reverse stripes, the model can be fitted to any existing concept of the structure of oceanic ridges. This sounds like the words of one of those minority scientists that think the Earth is 6,000 years old. And believe me, when I say scientist, I'm using the term very loosely. Furthermore, The magnetic bands may not form by reversals of the Earth's magnetic field at all. Dole and Cox state that the reversed magnetization of some rocks is now known to be due to a self-reversal mechanism. Jacobs continues, such results show that one must be cautious about interpreting all reversals as due to field reversal, and the problem of deciding which reversed rocks indicate a reversal of the field may, in some cases, be extremely difficult. Thus, Meyerhoff's concluded the so-called magnetic anomalies are not what they are purported to be. Again, people who, as Purple said, got their PhD from a university in a house trailer. But to settle the issue, Hall and Robinson reported on recent deep crustal drilling in the North Atlantic Ocean. Drilling of magnetized rocks revealed the absence of the source of linear magnetic anomalies. They concluded it is clear that the simple model of uniformly magnetized crustal blocks of alternating polarity does not represent reality. Why? Because the drilling reveals that down the holes a variation of magnetization intensity occurs on several scales from centimeters to tens of meters, and there are no consistent trends with depth. Furthermore, it is poor agreement between a sense of the effective magnetization in the drilled holes and associated linear anomalies. In other words, the actual magnetism in the rocks, was bolded there, on the seafloor bore no resemblance to the magnetism previously recorded from boats sailing across the ocean surface. Yes, because things must be totally uniform. If one layer of sediment is 10 meters deep, all others must be 10 meters deep, right? This not possible that a rotating bit gets the magnetic patterns skewed up a bit, bringing them up. Spinning steel could never change a magnet. Okay, but Purple, you are a reasonably smart person who cares about honesty and facts. We're talking about Ken Ham here. I think you're forgetting that very simple fact. So kudos to you for, caring about accuracy. Ken Ham is one of those people that fully admits to starting with source material of the Bible and working backwards from that to see how facts can be made to fit his narrative, not how a narrative can be made by fitting facts. It is apparent that crustal drilling has shown that the process of generation and modification of oceanic crust are much more complex than originally thought. Find me a geological scientist that said it was bone dead simple. Find me one. I don't think you will find one. Because as with everything, there is context. Not everything is perfectly uniform, Ken. I know he likes to believe that it is because he mathed out the population change once. I saw a video, he did this, where he basically went from two people, Adam and Eve, even though taking a rib from Adam, it would have been Adam and Steve, just chucking that out there. But from two people to the nearly 8 billion that exists now, or more than 8 billion, I honestly don't know what the population of the Earth is right now. Too many, I can tell you that. But That's too many from a sustainability standpoint. Watch Ken try to spin that into me suggesting genocide, which is his side of things. Land anomalies. Meanwhile, the magnetic properties of rocks have also been measured on land, and it is now well established that there are large linear areas of rock within which are successive stripes of reversed and normal magnetic polarity. We passed 8 billion about 2 years ago. Okay. Okay, there I am. Humphreys has recently reviewed the evidence for the validity of fossil magnetism studies and has found that fully half, okay, of all the 200,000 plus geological samples tested have measurable magnetization whose direction, polarity, is reversed with respect to Earth's present magnetic field. He concluded that variety, extent, continuity, and consistency of all reversal data all strongly suggest that most of the data are valid, so he has no option but to accept the reversals of the Earth's magnetic field must have occurred. Yeah, sounds about right. The problem with the interpretation of these magnetic data is the presumed mechanism for operation of the Earth's magnetic field, and thus presumed multi-million year timescale for these reversals. I am suddenly popular. I'm getting messages back and forth right now. Where am I? The operational mechanism preferred by many geophysicists, the so-called dynamo hypothesis, has many problems associated with it, which have been well documented. The only viable alternative is the hypothesis that proposes freely decaying electric currents in the Earth's core, a mechanism that can account for magnetic reversals recorded in the rocks having taken place in a matter of only days or years. Bullshit. I guarantee Ken has no actual data for this, but let's take a look at the footnotes he left. His work cited needs work. That's what it looks like. This is the kind of works cited I did when I was a child. It's poorly done, and I have no way of actually referencing any of this. But once again, trust Ken Ham to be completely friggin' dishonest. Potassium-argon dating. As to the successful dating of the seafloor magnetic anomalies, which such a claim is doubtful. Wesson says the potassium-argon dating, when correctly interpreted, shows no evidence of increasing age or distance from the ridge. Furthermore, others have found that the greater argon content, giving older apparent age of the ocean floor basalts on the flanks of mid-ocean ridges, can be easily explained by greater depth and pressure at the time of solidification, incorporating original magmatic argon, not derived by radioactive decay. Fourth grade project C-. Yeah. But before I learned how to do APA citations, that's what it would have looked like when I was a child. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have to research how to do APA style citation again, because one, it may have changed slightly in the years since I've had to cite anything, and two, I just haven't done it in years. Ken Ham purports himself to be a scientist. but he can't do basic citation? Come on. Subduction. A corollary, to the idea of plate growth by seafloor spreading is the notion that converging plates are destroyed below the deep ocean trenches, a process called subduction. The volcanic island arcs and colossal mountain ranges associated with ocean trenches, an example, the Pacific Ring of Fire, are said to result from remelting of the subducted or under thrust plate at a depth of up to 700 kilometers. While the deep and high intensity earthquakes in these same areas are assumed to indicate movement and breakup of underthrust plate. So I do want to go back real quick to the different ages of rock. I don't think Ken Ham understands that there can be ejected material. So when material gets ejected from these areas of spreading or subduction, whatever, different aged material will get, young material will get placed with old material when it finally lands and settles. But hey, I'm actually thinking Ken is working backwards from his conclusion rather than taking the data and working forward. We're not talking about a smart man. Two major difficulties make the subduction hypothesis extremely questionable. First, if subduction occurs, there should be compressed, deformed, and thrust-faulted sediments on the floors and trenches. However, the floors of the Peru, Chile, and East Aleutian trenches are covered with soft, flat-lying sediments devoid of compressional structures. I doubt that's true. I sincerely doubt it. I have a feeling that Ken looked for evidence of his claim and just ignored anything that contradicted it. But as we all know, when he famously debated Bill Nye, he said nothing could change his mind. No amount of evidence whatsoever. So, again, not an honest man. Second, seismic first motion data indicate that the modern earthquakes occurring approximately under trenches and island arcs are often tensional and only rarely compressional. Okay, but the existence of earthquakes goes a fair length in proving plate tectonics and continental drift. Like, what do you... Purple has more context. Soft sand on the surface, but all the rock under the soft sand started out as sand millions of years ago. I hate touchscreens sometimes. The stuff that has solidified into rock is of course solid and does not shift, short of an earthquake. The drift mechanism? What about a driving force for continental drift and plate motion? How is a plate 10,000 kilometers long, several thousand kilometers wide, and 100 kilometers thick kept in constant but almost imperceptibly slow movement during millions of years? Okay, there are layers to the Earth. The Earth is not unlike an onion that way. There are layers. Much like with ogres. So you have the crust, the mantle, blah, 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 blah. I don't remember all the layers. There are different levels of heat in the different layers. So the crust is cooler than the mantle, which is cooler than the core. So this magma, this liquid rock, can be thought to be flowing similarly to liquid. That motion, because the Earth is spinning, it's not flat like Kenny would probably think it is. The Earth spins on its axis, which causes this molten rock to spin similarly, which causes the plates to move. I am not a scientist. I am not a geologist. Again, my perception of geology is this rock shiny, this rock not, this rock soft, this rock hard. And I'm doing better than Ken. This is embarrassing for you, Ken. Will slow and continuous application of stress on a plate 100 kilometers thick cause it to be torn asunder? I don't think anyone ever said that. But hey, let's put words in scientists' mouths to prove your point. You dishonest hack. How can a plate be broken and then rammed slowly into the Earth's mantle to a depth of 700 kilometers? The Earth is big. Big Earth. Plate, small compared to big Earth. 700 kilometers is very small on a global scale, Ken. Jesus fuck. Explanations for plate motion range from very doubtful to impossible. One popular theory is that convection currents in the Earth's mantle exert lateral forces on plates, moving them slowly and continuously. But the best theory of the mantle's viscosity demonstrates that large-scale convection cells are impossible. Actual citation, please. He's got a little footnote here, but I showed you the footnotes. They're not good work cited. So I can't look up what the blue fuck he's talking about or what he's referencing. 3 other theories are sometimes mentioned. 1, plates slide by gravity from the elevated mid-ocean range to the depressed trench. 2, plates are pulled into the mantle below trenches by chemical phase changes during melting. And 3, plates are pushed apart along mid-ocean ridges by slow injection of magma into vertical cracks. Each of these mechanisms, alone or together, cannot overcome the vicious drag at the base of the plates, and cannot explain how the difference in elevation developed, or how the plate boundary originally formed. I don't think you know what you're talking about, Ken. An article in Drift Measured? An article in Scientific American, which we all know is an actual scientific paper, not an op-ed on scientific shit. I'm kidding. I'm being facetious. It's not. It's just science dumbed down for the average person to be able to consume. Seems to suggest to the casual reader, it's meant for the casual reader. It's not meant for scientists. Scientists use different language than the average person. The continents are drifting relative to each other. The authors close the article with a map which summarizes the results from 2 sets of observations, their own between observatories in the Eurasian and North American plates, which are supposed to be moving apart along the mid-Atlantic ridge, and those from NASA between the Pacific plate and the Eurasian and North American plates, respectively, which are supposed to be coming together. This obviously the most obviously impressive thing about these results is that in both groups of observations, the different direction of the apparent movement is that predicted by current theory. See table 1, I'll show you in a second. How impressive are the results? Now, he doesn't write table 1, but this is the only table on the page. So, there's a little bit of difference between observed and predicted movement in a year. Carter Wilson predicted 1.7. It doesn't even say where, but I don't know. I think he just threw this table together to impress idiots, because I don't know. It looks like nonsense to me. But hey, if there's a scientist out there who can read the table, go back a few seconds, pause it, take a look at it, and get back to me in the comments. Let us assume, there's that word again, that the technique itself is inherently accurate and reliable in spite of the fact that the accuracies claimed, changes as small as a centimeter in relative positions of points on the Earth, are mind-boggling over such distances. The reader may get the impression that the distance has actually been measured as varying by the amounts shown in each case, but this is not so. Okay, let me use a different approach here. Glaciers are big relative to, say, us, but small relative to the Earth. We measure the movement of glaciers, which is centimeters or inches in a year. But how can something as big as a glacier move, Ben? Well, they do. Look, I'm not saying I'm an expert. In fact, I'm literally saying the opposite. I am not an expert. I'm just a guy spouting off on the internet. A guy who knows more than Ken Ham, apparently. But glaciers move. Plates move on the Earth. So continental drift is a fact. Again, Ken, I have to explain this at least once a video, because he's so thick he never gets it. Theory is what is used to explain a fact. Facts have theories. This is not the colloquial use of the word theory. Scientists don't just get a burr up their ass and they're like, oh, well, maybe this is how it works. Let's just write that down in a science book. No, that's not how it works. They take the data and they work from that. Ken Ham, however, would like to conflate the two. You know, he wants people to believe that a theory is just a guess. It's not. Ken is so close to getting it. The reason we accept all these different methods to be reasonably accurate is because we have so many different methods that all collaborate to giving us the same age. Okay. On to hurting my own brain. Where was I? The reader may get the impression that the distance has actually been measured as varying by the amounts shown in each case, but this is not so. The results are given as a rate. We are not told how this rate was obtained, how far the plate really moved, and over what period of time? Okay. I have a feeling if I were to read one of these scientific papers, that they would explain the mechanism by which they studied. Ken is just too stupid to understand it. He won't admit it, but he is. Now, let me be unlike Ken Ham. If I read this scientific paper, I wouldn't understand it. I don't speak the same language as scientists. It's literally like they have their own language. They use jargon that's relevant to the topic at hand. So would I understand everything in a scientific paper by geologists? No. Just like I wouldn't understand the language in the paper written by a physicist or astrogeologist or a biologist. Ken Ham is being dishonest. Random fluctuations. The authors Carter and Robertson say in their opening paragraphs that the technique has been operational for more than a decade. But in January 1983, fuck, this book is old. Science News, again, highly reputable source. Science News reported that interferometry had been used to make measurements like this, looking for movement between plates since 1979, and no one had yet detected any change! Exclamation point. Carter and Robinson make no mention of this, nor do they attempt to give non-drift explanations for apparent changes in the baseline. They do, however, make a very telling admission. I'm going to stop before I proceed. Why would they attempt to give a non-drift explanation when we know for a fact plates drift? Why would they do that? The baseline lengths, this is the very telling admission. Let's see how telling it actually is. The baseline lengths are increasing at a rate between 1 centimeter and 2 centimeters per year. On the other hand, the baseline lengths also exhibit equally large random fluctuations. Hence, from these data alone, we would be reluctant to conclude that we had really measured plate motions. Okay. I have to say this again. Not everything is uniform. Motion of a plate may not be uniform. Jesus. It's not like each individual plate is a square or is perfect. Damage happens, particularly when we're talking about plates bumping and grinding and subducting into each other. And yes, Purple, you're right. I should start drinking before I do this. It will hurt less. But I don't want to be that drunk asshole who's, I just want to be that asshole. You know what I mean? It appears that far more detail and probably another decade or so of careful observation would need to be reported before one could begin to reach satisfactory conclusions. It is currently just as valid to accept the 4 years or so of no change reported to 1983 as to accept that drift has been actually measured. No, it's not, though. It's not. The idea that there is no motion for years on end is ridiculous. Like I said, motion of the mantle will help cause the drift of tectonic plates. They are constantly moving. A very small amount, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. Just like let's bring it back to evolution. Let's make evolution relevant to this chapter, shall we? Change over time is sometimes imperceptibly small. but it is change. I have attributes of my parents. My parents have attributes of their parents. My child will have attributes of me and Alex. These are small changes over time. Very small changes over time, which lead to bigger changes over bigger time. So let's take this back to Pangea, right? The supercontinent that Ken Ham complains can't be possible. Taking the Earth, by the way, is about 4.5 billion years old. Big old, right? Really old. When you take little bits of motion over big amounts of time, eventually you get big motion. Just very, very slowly. And I do have to explain this like I'm talking to a 5-year-old, because Ken Ham is so deficient in the ability to think that I have to. However, the claim that continental drift has been measured will probably become the popular view from now on. Carter and Robinson themselves are commendably cautious. Once we have accumulated enough observations to be sure the measurements of plate motions are accurate, the measurements will have great value as a check on plate tectonic theory. Emphases added. You don't say. Hang on, I missed comments. Generally, the plates grind past each other by millimeters, but occasionally pressure builds up, and then there will be an earthquake when one plate can leap several feet in an instant. How much more of this bullshit do I have to read? A little over 2 pages. About 2.5 pages left. Continental drift has been a generally accepted theory for over 50 years. Okay, so Purple answered the first question I had at the beginning of the stream. Thank you. Yes, apparently it was somewhere in the ballpark of 1962. And I'm out of water. Unfortunately, they are less temperate in some earlier parts of the article. Again, we're still on a non-scientific source. You know, what was the name of this magazine they referenced? Science News. Why can't you use actual papers, Ken? Why can't you reference actual studies rather than Scientific American and Science News? And why do you have to be so dishonest about these dumbed down for the average person articles? Unfortunately, they are less temperate in some earlier parts of the article. Now we are beginning to measure the baselines, getting longer by about a centimeter a year. We are watching geology happen. I would love to know the in-between context, because now we are beginning to measure I said that because it just dot. I'm reading this book word for word. I'm not skipping anything. I'm not leaving anything out to help my own mental faculties. I'm not skipping important context. I'm not skipping unimportant context. But Ken feels completely willing to skip context. The contrary result. The way Ken Ham works those three dots could be skipping a dozen pages. Yes, it could be. Contrary result. The most fascinating part of the whole article in Science News, not an actual paper, however, is that two observatories on the North American continent in Texas and Massachusetts, respectively, must, if one uses the same sort of approach to the data, be accepted as moving towards one another at a rate of 1 centimeter per year, even though they are supposed to be on the same rigid plate. These plates are not straight lines. Some parts are more jagged than others when they rub against each other or collide into each other, or one goes under the other and above the other. What happens is damage. So they don't stay even as they are for very long. This hurts. This hurts so much. Why am I doing this to myself? Right? Why did I think this would be less painful? This makes nonsense of the Carter-Robinson claim. It appears that the very long baseline interferometry is indeed capturing plate tectonics in action. When this result is completely contrary to the current plate tectonic theory, science changes when it makes new discoveries, Ken. That's why it's science. Jesus. Contrary to the current plate tectonic theory, these measurements are supposed to capture inaction. That's in action, two separate words, not one inaction. Just making sure everyone's clear. The current plate tectonic theory that was used in the computer modeling to predict what drift values should be observed assumes the plates move at a constant rate and move rigidly so that there is no motion within the plates. Okay, if that were true, I understand why you would consider it faulty, because plates probably don't move at a uniform rate. You know, like going back to my example of glaciers. Glaciers do not move at the same rate at all times. It slows or speeds depending on the heat or whatever. You know, they're so thank you, Ken, for pointing out a possible flaw in the technique and busting your own bullshit at the same time. By their own admission, therefore, their measurement of contraction of the Texas-Massachusetts baseline within the North American plate disproves this assumption, throwing into doubt both the computer modeling and plate tectonic theory on which it was based. Not factual. That is not factual, Ken. You're lying again. You do not have to throw out plate tectonic theory. New claims of measured drifts. Please tell me I'm almost done. I'm very nearly there. New claims have been made at a 1989 conference that drift has actually been measured. David Smith of NASA reviewed the data collected since the late 1970s via the space geodetic techniques of laser ranging to satellites and very long baseline interferometry, which will probably be referred to as VLBI going forward by Ken. And I'm not going to go back and forth to remember what it is. So if I say VLBI, it's very long baseline interferometry. And claimed that these measurements are confirming the geological predictions for motions between major tectonic plates. I don't know why he put plates in quotations there. We all know that calling it a plate is a way of making it understandable. However, these results are only from the continuation of the same NASA measurement program as that reported in Scientific American and Science News, the latter stating in 1983 that no one had yet detected any movements. You are not referencing scientific articles, Ken. You are referencing something that is made more simple for the average reader to understand. So we can be like, oh, this is a cool thing. The latter stating in 1983. Okay, I already read that. Now, Smith is claiming movements have been measured. But again, he reports the results only as a rate. Yes, because the rate is the average by which it moves. Example, 15 millimeters a year across the Mid-Atlantic Range, 170 millimeters a year across the East Pacific Rise, and 28 millimeters a year across the San Andreas Fault. But how far have the plates really moved, and over what period of time? We are not told. Liar. If you would read the actual papers, you would realize that you're full of crap. I guarantee it, because if a scientist leaves that sort of thing out in the actual article that they write, they will be picked apart by other scientists, and deservedly so. Smith says only the overall agreement with models of plate motions based on geological data of the past 30 million years is very good, but how much have the evolutionary models of geological data and time influence rate? Evolution has nothing to do with plate tectonics, you moron. God, you're stupid. We still have cause to be skeptical of such claims of measured drift, but await fuller documentation in the scientific literature. So again, the revision of this book was released in 1992. He's referencing 10-year-old data. He's bringing up stuff from 1983 as though it's somehow relevant. In 1992, there would have been more up-to-date data. You're lying again, Ken. All right, let's get to my favorite part, a biblical perspective. Bearing in mind that I have not read this yet. I am reading live with all of you. If the continents have drifted in the past, then it is not yet clear from measurements that they are still drifting today. Yes, it is. We're measuring it year to year, Ken. This is important to a biblical view of geology, not because the Bible speaks directly for or against continental drift, but because the biblical post-flood framework of the continents with their loads of flood-deposited fossil-bearing strata separated to their present positions, example at the time of the Tower of Babel, suggested by some because Genesis 10:25 says the earth was divided in the days of Peleg. The relatively short time involved would lead to enormous difficulties in accounting for the heat energy necessarily dissipated against friction, not to mention the Earth movements and destruction at the Earth's surface would result from such rapid continent-wide motion. There has not ever been a global flood, Ken. I don't know how many times it's been disproven, but here we are discussing it. You're talking about it. I'm talking about it. I hate myself for doing this a little bit. However, in the Dodwell asteroid impact model for triggering the flood catastrophe, supported by seemingly impeccable astronomic data, kill me. The existence of a crust which has been cracked into several plates is no surprise. Oops. Sorry. I have a really poor man setup here. So apologies for that. Caught me by surprise a little bit. Woke you up if you were sleeping, though. Okay, so let's discuss the idea of the Earth having been actually just one plate being cracked into several. No. There is no reason whatsoever to believe that the Earth was ever just one giant plate and then an asteroid smacked the Earth and broke up the plates. No. There's no reason to believe that. Where did you come up with this idea, you imbecile? Why did neither the Chinese nor the Mayans notice when the world flooded and their cities were destroyed? I think I brought this up last week in chapter 1. But it's a good question because Ken doesn't have an answer for it. Nor is the evidence for increased volcanic and earthquake activity at the boundary of those plates. Indeed, it would be a great surprise in view of the inferred temperature differences between the Earth's interior and exterior, among other physical factors, that there were absolutely no relative movements between the plates once they had formed by cracking the previously unified crust, the breaking up. He's trying to say that the Earth cracked open and water came up from magma. That is a new level of stupid that I've yet to hear from him. That is no. Beneath the crust is liquid hot magma. It's molten rock, man. Why am I doing this to myself? Why am I letting you do this to me? Okay. Furthermore, the flood model for the development of development of many of the Earth's crustal strata can account for the magnetic stripes in some of the layers. No, it can't. That appear to record past countless reversals of the Earth's magnetic field. If we apply the Barnes mechanism for generation of the Earth's magnetic field, which is superior to the so-called dynamo hypothesis, I've never heard of the Barnes mechanism, so I doubt it's accurate. Then again, I'm also not a scientist, so who knows? Maybe an actual scientist out there is familiar with the Barnes mechanism and they can explain it and why it's bunk, but hey. Then the Earth's magnetic field could well have flipped many times during and soon after the flood. The mechanism for retreat of the floodwaters is also associated with tectonics. Psalm 104:6-7. Why should I give a rotten rat fart about your dumb Bible? Describes the abating of the waters which had stood above the mountains. The 8th verse, properly translated, says the mountains rose up and the valleys sank down, implying that vertical earth movements were the dominant tectonic forces operating at the close of the flood, in contrast to the dominant horizontal forces postulated in much of modern continental drift theory. It is significant, therefore, that the mountains of Ararat, Genesis 8:4, and the resting place of the ark after the 150th day of the flood are in a tectonically active region at what is believed to be a junction of 3 crustal plates. The ark has never been found. There is no ark. There is no Noah. Noah's ark is based off of older stories. Because why? Why? I said this in chapter 1. Why are there so many flood theory stories across the world, the ancient world? Because people live in areas that they have easy access to water. We need water to survive. Without water, we die. And I ran out of water, so I am currently dying, apparently. I'm also getting highly aggravated because I'm reading this dumb shittery. There is no ark. Didn't happen. There was no flood. Didn't happen. And if it did, it didn't. The God that caused it would be the most immoral, genocidal being in the history of the earth. Just saying. A meter or two of measured movement today is no issue, but if that movement for several plates is consistently in the direction predicted by theoretical models of plate tectonics, it appears to constitute powerful evidence for these. If such evidence does exist and does stand the test of time, then the Dodwell model may probably be the most fruitful area to explain initial rapid drifting of plates during the flood. Please let me stop. Please let me stop. I can't stop. I'm almost there. Almost at the end. If I were any further from the end, I would get water purple, but I will make it. I am literally on the last page. Oh, where was I? So it became okay. Let me start this sentence over because I stopped mid-sentence. If such evidence does exist and does stand the test of time, then the Dodwell model may probably be the most probably want to make an assumption about that. Probably can be the most fruitful area to explore to explain initial rapid drifting of plates during the flood as they overcame the viscous drag of the Earth's mantle for a short time due to enormous catastrophic forces at work, followed by a slowing down to present rates. So many assumptions are being made by Ken right now. That's all he's got is assumption and maybe and probably, which actually is possibly, not probably, because probably implies that it most likely happened. And such continental separation could potentially solve some other apparent geological enigmas. For instance, the amazing similarities of sedimentary layers in the northeastern United States to those in Britain, but the absence of those same layers in the intervening North Atlantic basin, the similarities in the geology of parts of Australia with South Africa, India, Antarctica, etc. However, as we have seen today, the evidence from these measurements does not require any such reassessment. It should be noted that some are turning to the Dodwell model. Doubt it. As an explanation for continental drift as post-flood catastrophe occurring, for example, in the days of Peleg. Back to present, how can you go backwards to get to now? Ken's an idiot and doesn't understand how this shit works. That's how. That's my assumption. That's probably what he did. It's my conjecture. Yes, I am making fun of Ken, by the way, for using those words over and over again. Not conjecture, it's too big of a word for him. In conclusion, the absence of sufficient mechanisms for plate motion, the uncertainty regarding seafloor paleomagnetism, and the existence of seafloor spreading, and the doubts about subduction render the whole idea of continental drift and the theory of plate tectonics highly speculative and questionable. No, not the case. As one evolutionist has said, why then do a few crabbed? The fuck does it mean to be crabbed? Why then do a few crabbed Earth scientists refuse to accept some or all of the tenets of the new global tectonics? I would love this person's name. But Ken's source is, trust me, bro. Strictly speaking, then, we do not have a scientific hypothesis, but rather a pragmatic model reshaped to include each new observation. Obviously, this kind of model is not testable in any rigorous scientific sense. Claims of drift actually being measured today are also doubtful. In any case, the Bible does not directly speak for or against continental drift. If the Bible doesn't speak for or against continental drift, why does this chapter exist? Why? 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 Why does this chapter exist? I'm beginning to think Ken believes in a flat Earth. I'm beginning to think that. But, yeah, that was nonsense. My brain hurts. Wait, is he dissing the evolution just eventually turns everything into crabs and fact thingamajigger called cursing? I don't know. Is Ken now trying to retcon the Bible to fit with the lore of his museum? Maybe. I don't know. I've never heard anyone called crabbed, though, before. Never heard of it. But join me next week. I will almost definitely need a scientist for this one. What about carbon-14 dating? I will almost definitely need someone who at least understands what they're talking about. Because I know jack shit about carbon-14. But unlike Ken, I'm at least honest. I don't actually know what I'm talking about most of the time. I'm just going based off of what I know best. And I can start with Ken being an idiot, because he is. But for everything else, I take known facts and then I listen to experts. Because that's what I got to do. Because I'm not one. I'm not saying it properly. Too drunk and tired to care, Treya. I wish I were drunk too. It would be so helpful after reading this nonsense. But yeah, that's all for chapter 2. What about plate tectonics? Join me next week. Yes, I know it's December 22nd. It's very close to Christmas, but I'm not taking the day off because, well, I'm giving myself a whole week in between. And if I don't force myself to do it, I may not do it at all. And to an end, this series comes. And, well, right now I want to keep it going. Oh, you're drunk from lack of sleep, not alcohol. Okay. Yeah, fair. So, yeah. Join me next week. Enjoy my pain if that's what it takes. I am in pain. My head hurts now because of all the stupid and the dead brain cells clumping up. Yeah. Yeah. See you later, everybody. Join me next week. Same bat time, same bat place.